Hi, this is Derek Regensberger, and welcome to another episode of the Clarinet Connection, your source for gear and product reviews and practice and performance tips for the clarinet. In today's episode, we're going to look at tip 12 in 24 tips for better clarinet playing. And this episode involves sight reading. Sight reading is one of those necessary evils we have to do as musicians. It's a skill that can intimidate people and really cause anxiety for a number of players. So in today's episode, I'm going to give you some tips for how to become a better sight reader. And yes, there is a method to the madness for how to improve. So first of all, let's take a look at why we have to sight read. Being able to sight read effectively is going to help us become much more efficient in our preparation process. The other thing that sight reading does is it allows you to expand your repertoire much more broadly. It allows you to play a number of different types of music, but also be able to play simply a greater volume of music. If you have to spend less time rehearsing each and every part of a new piece of music, then you're going to be a much more effective and, again, a much more efficient player. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can improve sight reading. A movement called Cicads, or your eye movement, and being able to focus ahead on what's coming up next is really an important step to sight reading. It's more than simply practicing it, in other words. There's an actual science behind how you improve. And if we relate it to how we read, I think that's a really important lesson that we can take from how we learn other skills and apply it to sight reading. So if we're reading a book, for example, or we're reading language, we don't just simply gather in one letter at a time and focus in on each successive letter as it comes to us, right? We'd be reading cat, C, A, T, and it would bog us down, and it would become a very frustrating process if we had to read that slowly and only one character at a time. The same is true of sight reading music. If we're simply looking at a piece of music and saying A, B, G, it becomes a much slower process than if we can go, for example, D minor scale, D minor arpeggio. It becomes imperative that we kind of chunk material together so that we can read it more like a book than an individual note. And so that's really one of the keys to sight reading, and I'll get a little bit more into that in the course of this video. So if you're always focused on simply the note you're playing, you're going to quickly be overwhelmed in sight reading. So the idea is to be able to improve that eye movement. And you might take, for example, a very slow passage and start working at half notes. And then once you can move your eye to the next note, you might jump to quarter notes, etc. So the key concept with improving your saccades, or your ability to see ahead, if you will, is to simply look at the next note while you're playing the last one. Unfortunately, we have what I call carriage returns, right? If we think back to the concept of a typewriter, when we came to the end of a line, we had to hit the carriage return to jump down to the next line. Well, that's exactly what we have to do when we are sight reading. When we get to the end of a line, there's a natural delay in what's coming next. Where am I going? And so we've got to develop a speed and a comfort of moving from one line to the next. And so again, I think it's imperative that you start slowly. You want to, for example, have, let's say, quarter notes or half notes, and really start to build your speed up. So the idea is to be able to skip to that next line without losing what you're playing. So it becomes imperative again to look ahead. So that's why developing the saccade movement is really important. And you just simply practice this with faster and faster rhythms. So you can increase the tempo and play the same half note and quarter note until you're comfortable moving from bar line to bar line. But it's really important that you be able to move to that next that note ahead. Another suggestion is that you want to try and memorize the next part of the music that you're going to play while you're playing the notes you've already memorized. The idea, again, is to be able to memorize what you're playing. So in this instance, if I'm going from A, G, F, I'm going to memorize that set of 3 notes. And then as I'm looking at the next set, I'm going to put that into my short-term memory. Now this is not long-term memorization. This is simply allowing you the ability to put into your short-term memory the next set of notes that you have to play. You're not going to encode this into long-term memory because you're not having to recall it multiple times. You're going to forget it almost immediately. But that short-term recognition and that kind of search for patterns, that chunking, if you will, so we're trying to convert individual notes into some sort of word, for lack of a better term. That musical phrase, that musical bucket that we're trying to put several notes into is really what we try and put into short-term memory. The drawback with short-term memory is it's not very large. You can put about 4 to 7 things in there at one time. So if you've got really good short-term memory, you can maybe get a 7-note sequence into your short-term memory. So you might be able to look ahead as much as, a half a measure to a measure ahead. For most of us, we're probably going to get 4 or 5 things in that short-term memory. And as a result, you really want to focus in, though, on that, 2 to 4 note patterns so that you can, again, put into short-term memory what you were playing next. This is also going to allow you, again, to be able to transition between bar lines much quicker because now you're looking for the pattern. Now you're looking ahead. Now you're anticipating what's coming next rather than sort of waiting for it and having it just simply go by too fast. But start really simply first. Don't have a lot of mixed patterns. Don't have a lot of mixed meter. Just have it be basic. And the reason for that is you want your mind to be focused on the skill, learning the note patterns, rather than all the other things that your mind will have to focus on, which is rhythm and where the notes fall, particularly when you get into 16th and 32nd notes. You're having to figure out so many notes that your brain's going to bog down. In other words, your short-term memory is going to be filled up with all those other things rather than simply the notes that are coming up next. So this is a process that's going to take a little bit of time, but once you start to master it and once you're able to kind of skip ahead on a reliable basis, your sight reading is going to improve dramatically. Now that we know the basic process involved, how do we get better? One of the best ways to do that is something like the complete Classe method book. Having a method book like this with lots of different examples is, I think, really helpful. And let's say that you want to work on a particular aspect of rhythm and also improve your sight reading. It's going to kind of do those 2 things at once. So this particular one is a dotted 8th note pattern. The idea is that by using some of the practice tools that we have on hand, we can also use them to practice sight reading. There's an even better way, though, to do this, and that is to use one of the subscription services like Sight Reading Factor. And what's so special about Sight Reading Factor? One of the great tools that you can use with Sight Reading Factor is you can set the parameters for what you want your little selection to look like. It's going to randomly generate a melody and rhythm pattern based on the parameters that you tell it. For example, I could select a particular time signature, note value. I could enter a random rhythm pattern or just, again, have it focus on one particular element of rhythm. So depending on your level of familiarity, you can really customize the sight reading segment to anything you want. Yes, we could use a piece of music. There are thousands of pieces of music in the world to sight read. We could go read, piano music, violin music. It doesn't have to be just clarinet music. But the idea is that by having a program set parameters, we really focus on one simple skill. In other words, we can be very intentional on the type of skill and the type of sight reading that we want to work on. And so I think having that available in a program is really helpful. So you can see here where the pattern is randomly generated by the program, and you can see it's just a couple of bar lines long. And the advantage of this, again, is that I can work on various elements of sight reading. I can also tell it to customize the level. So if I'm a beginner, I can set this so that it is a very low level. So you can see that this is a level 5. It goes from a low G to a high C. So it'll set the note value range. You can also, by the way, set the instrument so it doesn't set notes that are outside the limits of your instrument. And so, for example, if I set a level 1, you can see that I'm getting, half notes, maybe dotted quarter notes, and I'm also getting a very limited note range. So the nice thing about this, again, is that depending on my comfort zone of sight reading, I can really set the passages up so that they reflect what I want to work on. So let's go back. Let's do level 4. So it'll give me a countdown timer, and I can even set the tempo. I can put that in, let's say, at 80. And now when I go, I can play this at a much slower tempo. This particular software is Sight Reading Factory, and is probably the most popular one because of the number of tools and the number of customizations that are available to you. It is a subscription service. You can try it out for free and you get 20 free little clips like this. And if you decide that you like the way the service works and you find it helpful, you can subscribe. I think currently the rates are about $45 a year. So it's kind of a cool feature. You can even get feedback. You can do a whole host of customizations, as I said. So it's a pretty cool little tool to help you practice sight reading. All right, thanks for watching the Clarinet Connection, and tune in next time for another episode.